Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Winter Words. This is the second of 3 events this season. I'm Carolyn Torrey, and I'm here with Aspen Words Executive Director Adrienne Brodeur to make a few brief announcements and introduce tonight's speakers. This 29th season is presented in memory of Wally Obermeyer, a longtime supporter and avid Winter Words participant. And you'll find copies of his memoir, Lift, out in the lobby. Please take one home and enjoy. Thanks to all of you for purchasing tickets, for tuning in via the live stream. Your participation and support as members and patrons of Aspen Words makes this program and all of our programs possible. Our season presenting sponsors ensure we can keep these events affordable and provide free access for students and educators. Lily King will also visit Aspen High School tomorrow. Yeah. Thank you, Lily. And thank you to our season presenting sponsors, Michael and Lisa Cater, Garfield and Hecht, Melanie and Adam Lewis, Beth and Josh Mondry, and Helen Obermeyer. Thanks to our grantors. Oh, yes, thank you. Thanks to our grantors, host sponsors, and media partners. They include the City of Aspen, Les Dames d'Aspen, The Gant, Aspen One, Aspen Public Radio, and the Aspen Times. And a special thanks to tonight's National Council dinner hosts, Beth and Josh Mondry. Lastly, we just launched early bird discounted ticket sales for Book Ball, which is our annual fundraising gala, and that will be on July 10th, and will feature Jonathan Franzen. So go to aspenwords.org for more info, and we hope you'll join us this summer. And now I'll turn it over to you, Adrienne.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are really in for a treat tonight, and I'm delighted to begin by introducing our moderator, Mitzi Rapkin, one of my favorite author interviewers. Mitzi is the founder, host, and producer of the podcast First Draft, a dialogue on writing, which I cannot recommend highly enough. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe today. Over the past 12 years, she's conducted more than 550 in-depth interviews with some of the most distinguished writers working today. What sets Mitzi apart is the care and seriousness she brings to conversations about craft, creativity, and the deeper human questions that live beneath the work about what it means to be alive. She listens with rare attentiveness, and writers respond in kind. We are very lucky to have her with us. Mitzi will be in conversation with Lily King, yay! A writer I've been an unabashed fan of for years and years. Lily is the award-winning author of 6 novels and a short story collection. Many of you know Writers and Lovers, which was a New York Times notable book and named a Best Book of the Year by the Washington Post, NPR, People, and the Los Angeles Times. Her novel, Euphoria, won the Kirkus Prize, and her most recent novel, Heart the Lover, was published last fall, and it continues what I see as Lily's great gift, her ability to write about love and work and ambition and longing with clarity, restraint, and an enormous emotional intelligence. Why was that so hard to say? Her novels stay with you. They make room for uncertainty, and they honor the messiness of real lives. Please join me in giving a big, warm Winter Words welcome to Lily King and Mitzi Rapkin.
Hello. Thanks, Lily, for coming here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Aspen Words and Adrienne and everybody. I know it took a lot to put this all together, and I'm so, so grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Mitzi.
Of course. So I thought maybe at first we can start with a summary of the novel in case there's one or two who haven't read it yet. I'm happy to do it, but if you would like to do it, go for it.
Okay. Well, I'll try, and maybe you can continue,
Okay.
because mine will be bad.
Okay.
It's the word. I mean, if I could summarize it, then I wouldn't have had to write it. And so, and I also don't like to give anything away. I mean, anything. And so I won't tell you anything that happens. I'll just say that at the very beginning of the book, a college senior goes on a bad date with a smart guy, and it changes the entire course of her life. Do you want to elaborate?
I will elaborate. I'm going to elaborate without spoilers. So this senior that goes on the date, her name is, they call her Jordan. It's kind of a nickname. And the boy she goes out with is Sam, and he's very heady and intellectual and kind of religious. And he has a roommate named Yash, who becomes very important to Jordan throughout the course of the novel. She has sort of a love for both of them, and that kind of changes over time. And she stays at school, actually, to do an extra semester, which is where she really starts to write and find her true love for Yash. And then she goes to Paris, and she goes to grad school, and then we see her later. We're not giving any secrets away.
You can really plug your ears at this point.
And then we see her later in life, where she's married and has children. Yeah, but we won't give anything away about what happened, all that.
No.
So over the course of the book, one of the things you write, and this is when she is doing her extra semester, and she's really starting to understand herself, I believe, and she gets this teacher, a writing teacher, who's pretty meaningful and is a catalyst for her to see things in a new way. And you write, "She steers me away from the Southern Gothic plots I was enamored with last year and encourages me to write from my own emotions. I start to understand the power of fiction, the reason we make things up." And so I wanted to start with asking you about writing from your emotions, because you write a lot about love and friendship and parental relationships, but what about writing from emotion?
I really think that emotion is the only thing I really care about. I mean, when I get an idea for a book, I usually see some main character and maybe a handful of other people. But what I really feel is where that character is emotionally, what they're struggling with, and it's usually a struggle. I mean, I never think. I don't get an idea for a perfectly happy person on a boat, Like, they're usually in some sort of fraught situation, and then usually I have a sense of where I want that person to land. And so the whole book, really, the plot, the situations, everything is in service to that arc, that emotional arc. When I read books, I want to be moved. I want to feel what that person's feeling. I want to be taken on an emotional journey. And so, I'm trying to kind of take myself and the readers on a trip, usually.
And is it really your emotions that you're feeling that you're trying to create this truth from? Like your life, Lily? Or is it the emotions of the characters?
Yeah, it's definitely emotions that I have felt, but I put them into vessels that are not me. And I mean, sometimes, you can definitely point to things where I intersect with the character, but none of the characters that I've ever written have been me. If I try to write about myself non-fictionally in an essay, I can do it for a little while, but it's pretty flat. Like, I don't love it. It doesn't excite me really to write. I don't know. I need fiction. I need to make things up. I need to have that tool in my toolbox when I'm writing. I write from, my own experience, things I've read, things people have told me, and a vast amount of my own imagination. And so, anytime I'm writing a scene, I just try to grab every single tool. I have to have everything at my disposal. And so whatever's going to make the scene best, in my mind, is what I'll use.
Are you always writing?
No. I have not been writing for a long, long time, and it's really, I mean, I should have hives all over me. But I am researching, and I am thinking about it, and I do write in my journal.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're writing, if you're channeling some of your emotions into writing, if you feel like there's a quality to your life that is different when you're writing versus when you're not.
I mean, yes. Writing for me requires kind of my introverted self, and that can't happen when I'm traveling on book tour. And so the extroverted side kind of comes out, and the introverted side, I honestly can't find her, and I can't like sit on a plane and suddenly conjure her up to write fiction. It's just I'm bad at that. And so when I'm home, I have to be home, or I have to be somewhere for a sustained amount of time to write well, I think. I can't bop around. And yeah, I mean, I'm much quieter when I'm writing, and my days are certainly a lot slower, and I'm always wearing slippers, you know, and I'm drinking a lot of tea. So I do feel like a very different person.
Yeah. So in this novel and sort of the companion, Writers and Lovers, there's almost, I would call it, I'm open to your interpretation if my word is wrong, almost like a biblical, spiritual level that Jordan, your character, refers to writers, writing, and quotes from writers. And I wanted to ask you about that because it's very elevated for her.
Yeah, I mean, it's her passion. It's her one thing that has sustained her. I think, I mean, I don't think she really talks about it, but from childhood on, and just, you know, writers, books, writing is the thing that keeps her going, and the thing that she has just had a passion for forever. And then, you know, she finds Sam and Yash, and she can speak that language with them, you know, and they all three share that in different ways and for probably different reasons. But it's such a relief to her because she's gone all through college without meeting people like that.
Yeah, something that struck me about her relationship with these two, Sam and Yash, was a very mind and body thing. I mean, I think she's attracted to the minds of both, but one really appeals to her mind a lot more, and one, it's the mind and the body. There's like an electricness there. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I like better than when I can get a character to meet somebody who is exciting both mind and body, and it was really, really fun to develop that because it is just so much more thrilling to her, you know, to be able to like have sex and have banter at the same time. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably, for me as a reader, it's more entertaining than just like, you know, physical attraction and describing that. I'm not really so interested in that. I'm more interested in really something that can become something very, very big, you know, like a big, big love. And I think that's an element that's essential.
Yeah. Can we talk about love triangles?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
We can.
So, I mean, it's something, I interviewed you in 2017, and we talked about love triangle in Euphoria, and there are some, you know, competing friends who are interested in Jordan and how she kind of moves from one to the other. And I'm curious, again, about your interest in this, but something that struck me, so she dates Sam and she dates Yash. Mm-hmm. We can say that. And Yash is, I think, equally in a love triangle as much as she is. And I want to ask you about that.
Yes. The triangle in this situation is very triangulated, isn't it? Like
it's almost a circular triangle.
Yeah. Everybody kind of wants a piece of everybody else, you know. Like it's not just there's somebody off off stage, And yeah, I mean, I often say that the biggest love story in this book is with Sam and Yash. I mean, that is the love that really, really proves itself, you know. And she threatens that. She really does. She comes in the middle, and it could easily have all, you know, gone to smithereens. And I mean, a writer wants situations that have tension, you know, and that have drama. And so having 3 people instead of 2 people is, you know, just much more tense, you know, because we're supposed to be in 2s, not 3s. And so it's something that I, you know, obviously like to play with. It just keeps coming back. I'm really going to try not to do it in my next novel. But I also think there's an element of unavailability when you have a love triangle, and kind of I was asking a friend of mine when I went to Atlanta, and she's a psychologist, and I was kind of picking her brain about love triangles, and she's like, well, you know, there's the unavailability aspect, and there's also, you know, you can't get everything from one person, and so. I mean, that's just a fact, and so there's, you know, there's that piece of it too. Like, you know, what do you sacrifice, what do you keep, you know, that kind of thing.
I think there's also something in there about youth, right? She's a senior in college. This is, you know, her first love.
Sorry, I just know that's not going to go well.
Yeah. I'm happy to take a minute if you want to try.
No, it's okay. You keep going.
She has, you know, these first loves, and it's so fresh and it's so exciting for her. It's an awakening, basically. Yeah. And she has some decisions to make later as things are getting a little bit more convoluted. And there's a character that basically says to her, you know, these decisions that you make in your youth, they don't come back. You know, don't put this love second. And I wanted to see if you wanted to talk about that feeling of first love and these decisions you have to make and the people we are growing into becoming because of that. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that comment that's by a French woman that she meets, and the French woman is coming at it through very, very much her own perspective. And it really interests me when people give advice that's basically just very, very strictly based on what they've experienced and, you know, what the outcome was. And she really regrets giving up her first love. And then she's ended up years and years later back with him. And she just kind of wants Jordan to skip that step and just, you know, stick with him and not let it go. But in Jordan's case, it's like terrible advice. So it is funny because some people point to that, you know, as good advice. I'm like, no, that's bad advice.
Yeah.
But there is, I mean, it is, first loves are so intense, and, you know, it's all new. You know, you're just so, you're like a blank page, you know, that has no writing on it, and then this thing happens, and it's so big, and you're so vulnerable, and you have no idea how much it's going to hurt when it ends, you know, for whatever reason, and you know, I just find that vulnerability of the character and and sort of the poignancy of the situation, you know, I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, and Jordan, I mean, basically a lot of what happens in the book, which is good for fiction, and so I want to ask you about it for craft, but also in the book is sort of, you know, we have these opportunities to maybe tell someone how we feel or what we're thinking, and sometimes we miss each other, or sometimes we make assumptions and someone else is making a completely opposite assumption, and so you get tension in fiction, and you certainly get tension in real life. And that's a big part of it, is how do we really understand each other? What does it mean? So I just wanted to ask you more about that.
can you just elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm trying not to give it away for you.
Good.
But I think Jordan has certain expectations of Yash, and they have plans and certain things she believes are going to go a certain way. And he has assumptions about what's going on for him and who his allegiance lies to. So there's big things that happen in the book where they don't go her way.
Yeah.
And she goes on and lives with a complete assumption of how, and there's maybe an opportunity for her to discover that maybe it was something else.
Yeah.
And that's really important for fiction.
Yeah, and that is part of the poignancy of First Love too, is that unless you came from an extraordinarily healthy family of origin, you really are not great at communicating. And you make all kinds of assumptions. Like, someone, I don't know, doesn't pour you a glass of water. And you take it so badly because it echoes all these things that you experienced in your family when you were growing up. And, there are all these cues and triggers and all kinds of things, and you don't have enough distance, and you haven't had any therapy necessarily, and so you don't really understand like how your reality is being twisted and how much you're not saying and how much you are assuming and guessing. And I don't know. I mean, that was definitely true for me when I was early on, having like, a first couple of relationships. I just didn't know how to talk about anything. I could not be vulnerable like that. I just would not. I would just shut down. And I think that is what happens to her in a way, because he does this thing that really disappoints her, and boom, the wall goes up so high. And and that's what happens, and it's inexplicable to him too. Trying not to say too much.
Can you talk about the relationship of this to Writers and Lovers, and that digging into the youth of Jordan and how they sort of relate and how this came to be?
Yeah. So I won't say exactly what the connection is between the two books if you haven't read it, but I didn't think. I mean, it's not like while I was writing Writers and Lovers, I was thinking, oh, I've got another story about so and so here. I didn't at all. In fact, I didn't think about those characters really ever again. And then COVID hit the week that Writers and Lovers came out, and then I went on to a short story collection, and then I started writing a murder mystery that really, really went badly pretty quickly. And then I started writing this, and I wrote that the first scene takes place in the classroom when she first or they first notice her, really. And she didn't have a name. I didn't need a name. It was first person. And then I knew that there would be a leap. I knew that we were going to make this leap in time. And I knew that she would have a husband. And so when I wrote in a note in the back of my notebook, I write by hand. In the back of the notebook, I keep notes. And I was meaning to write, her husband, blah, blah, blah. But instead of writing her husband, I wrote a name. And then I looked at the name, and I was like, she's married to him? Well, that can't be. That cannot be. And I can't do that. And my editor won't like that. And I don't think I like that. And I don't write, connected books. And then I kept on writing, and it just kept on happening. Like, it kept on being her, and the details and things started dovetailing, and so that's how it came about, very, very inadvertently.
So did you resist that?
Well, a little bit. I tried. I kept on, not resist exactly, but I was like, maybe not. I'll kind of go with it, see how it goes, and then I still was open. Like I did it lightly enough that it could be withdrawn if I needed to, and I needed to know how my editor thought about it. I felt like it was kind of going to have an impact on everything, and like foreign sales and blah blah blah. Like I don't know, and so I wasn't. Not that if I was really, really 100%, I wouldn't care about any of that stuff. But because I was on the fence, I was willing to be swayed. So, but then with draft after draft, I got more and more kind of dug in with it.
Where do you think, like when you wrote that sentence and a name came up for who her husband was, and you're like, she's married to him, where do you think that comes from?
I don't know. I mean, I think that all kinds of things are working below the surface. I've found that many times writing this book, that there were things there kind of waiting that I don't feel consciously I knew about, but sort of obviously I must have known about. Very, very odd. I can't really explain it.
Like, do you think it's like that the subconscious plays a big part in your writing experience, or do you think it's maybe more tangible?
I don't know. I can't really access that. I just know that for me, writing really is not cerebral. It's not something I'm planning out. It's not an intellectual experience. I'm not thinking, now what are the themes here? And what are, I'm not doing any of that English teacher stuff. It's really much more from my gut, and much more, I don't know. There's a writer, Robert Olin Butler, and he has a book about writing called From
Where
Whence
You
We
Dream.
Yeah, it's a good book, isn't it?
Amazing.
I feel like that describes my process more than most. That it is this, it's not actually dreaming, but it's more like dreaming than anything else. Because it's a little bit like when you're just waking up and you're having a dream, but you can slightly control it. You can slightly be like, bring the cute guy back into the room, but you can't control it. It's a little bit like that. You go, it's not a trance exactly, but he does call it a trance, I think. And it's just a state of being that has its own conscience, I think.
Yeah, and that's sort of, when you think about the duality, like I was asking you at the beginning about the love for the mind and the body, what you're saying reminds me of, there's this maybe magical part when you're generating, but there's a very critical part that comes in when you're editing.
Yeah, exactly.
And in your book, because your characters talk so much about writing, they are also kind of trying to dissect it. Sometimes they argue. Like there was a point where the characters were arguing about, one was saying it's structure that makes a book.
Yeah.
And Jordan was saying, no, it's everything else. It's character, it's setting. So there is this very critical part to it. Do you, what is your experience then of the critical part? Because you also write about that all fiction is like time and distance or something.
I don't remember that.
There was a. It was the teacher, Dr. Felsky, is always talking about the two things that bring perspective and revelation to a character: time and distance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Maybe it was your generative brain that wrote that.
I know, exactly, or my bullshit, capacities.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the question again?
I'm just curious. Well, your critical brain has to come in, right?
Okay.
So
yes.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to talk about that because sometimes there are a lot of writers in the audience of my readings, and I think it's so important for that first draft to really get the critic completely out of the room. I mean, that critic is not helping you do anything, and it's just only gonna stop you in your tracks and keep your page empty. And so I very consciously, when I'm writing a first draft, put the critic out of the door, the judge, that voice in your head that wants to really, really, really tell you it's not going well. You don't know how to write this sentence. You're never going to get to that next scene kind of thing. I put that out the door. But then the critic has to come back like a little bit when I go from my handwritten notebooks and I put it onto the computer. Then there's there's definitely some editing that's happening, but there's also some creating that's happening. I definitely change things. I try to make it better. I try to enhance it. I usually, with my earlier drafts, I'm not a writer who writes too much and then has to cut. I'm a writer who writes too little and then has to expand. So in the putting it into the computer, I'm definitely expanding and writing. But there is an element of the critic, but there has to be room for the creator as well. And then in future drafts, then the critic. Then I'm printing it out, the whole thing. I'm reading it over like a reader, like a teacher, like somebody if I'm reading somebody in my writers group, then I have my real critical hat on, and I'm marking things and writing things in the margin. And so then I go through that draft, and then I put the changes onto the computer, and I print it out, and I read it over again. I put the changes in, and it goes on for a long, long time. And then finally, there's nothing else that I can do. Like I don't know. I know it still has problems, perhaps, but I don't know how to fix them, and I don't know what other problems are that I'm not seeing. And so then I have to give it to people. So I give it to my husband and my writers group, my agent and my editor.
And I think there was something when you finished this book that wasn't quite working, and you got some advice from your husband.
I did. Where is he? Are you back there? You're lucky I can't see you. I think he's a little tired of the story, and I'm sorry if you've heard it before, but it was kind of like one of those writing moments that I honestly didn't think I would ever experience, and so this book, that comment then when Yash says, every book of genius, is genius because of its structure. That really haunted me because I could not figure out the structure for this book. I could not do it. I took a walk with my friend Richard Russo, and I was just desperate. And he was like, well, you have to start at the end and then go back. And I was like, yeah. I tried that. It didn't work. And then I had a writers group friend. We had a lunch, and I was really struggling with the end. And she's like, well, she has to go on a walkabout. And I wrote 38 pages that take place in Iceland. And she's like literally climbing up on the mountain and making a sacrifice for her son's health. And it was just like, I really, really was at a loss for a long time. I had the first part, the college part, which was just supposed to be like 20 pages of backstory, because I thought that most of the story, when I first got the idea, was going to be this leap that she takes where we go 30 years in advance and they all end up in the same place. And that was my interest. That was my great passion about this book, was kind of getting down those scenes. But the reader needed to know what happened before. And so I just went back, but then that kind of really took over. And so that was the first part. I guess it takes place over maybe a year and a half. And then we made the big jump. And then I wrote the other stuff. And that was all there was. There were just 2 parts. Now there are 3, but there were just 2 then. And I wrote, the part that I wanted to write that was supposed to be the whole book. And I read it over, and it wasn't good. I mean, it wasn't bad, terrible, like really I have to start again, but it was flat. It was a little it didn't have enough tension. And so I went back in and I tried to ramp up the tension, like, oh, well, just kind of make the timeline shorter because of her son and everything that was going on with him, and blah, 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 blah. And then I'd read it over again, and it was flat. And this kept happening. And I'd read over the beginning parts, and I'd just tinker with it, and we'd bop, and then I'd get to this, and I'd be like, it's not working. And so I had 12 days before I had to hand in the very, very final draft of the novel to go into production. My editor was very clear. We are going into production. You can't stall any longer, is basically what she was saying. And I'd done all sorts of things to stall. Like, a friend of mine ran over my foot. And it was due. And so I got like another 6 weeks out of my deadline. I'm like, oh, my foot's been run over. But there were no broken bones.
But still
But
affects
I really
your
milked
writing.
it. I milked it. And so with a car, I mean, it wasn't like he didn't run over with a bicycle, but it was definitely a great excuse. And so then I had 12 days left, and I'd written another draft, and I read it over, and it was the same thing. I hadn't improved it. I hadn't fixed it. I just hadn't. And it was winter in Maine, and my husband was doing an erg. You probably don't even know what ergs are because you never have to be inside exercising here. But, it's a rowing machine. And it was kind of behind the couch, and I sat on the couch, and I was so bummed. And he looked at me, he stopped his erg, and he was like, "What is the matter?" And I said, it's still not working. I can't get it to work. And I saw him, and he was going to open his mouth and say the thing that he had been saying for a year, which was, and because he had read this book called Plot and Structure for Screenplays, and there was a list in that book of 10 tips to make your screenplay have more tension, and he thought that one of them would work, and so for a year he had been saying, "She needs to go there with a secret," and I was like, "She has no secret. She has no secret." And he would say it again, and I'm like, "She has no secret." In my back of my mind, I kind of well, she had a secret, it would be this, but I was like, "She has no secret." And then, a few months before that, he'd said it again, and I was, "Shut up, she has no fucking secret. There's no secret. There's no secret." So then he said it again that day, 12 days before I had to turn it in, and he's actually said it. And I looked at him, and I was like, "Fine." And I went into my study, and I opened up the last page of the first section. And when she goes to see her friend in Brooklyn, Carson opens the door and sees her, and I change 3 lines of dialogue and 1 little description. And then I called my husband in, and I read it to him. And this is my memory. Don't correct me, but I remember that you had a little tear in your eye. And I got goosebumps, and I was like, "Okay," and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go finish it now. and so I had 11 days to change the entire rest of the book. I had to change everything. I had to introduce a whole new section, part 2. I had a little tiny tree climbing scene that was 3 pages long. That was at the very, very beginning. I put that in the middle, and then I had to write, 20 more pages of that, which is something I'd really, really tried not to write when she brings him back to dinner. I did not. I had avoided writing that, and then I realized I had to write that, and I had to have a flashback to the whole secret thing, and I had to write so much. And then we get to part 3, where they, the 30-year thing, and then I had to rewrite everything. I mean, everything changed, and it was honestly, I just felt like I was on the scent. I really felt like I knew finally what it needed. And so it was just the most exhilarating 11 days. But I worked so night and day, just had to really, 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 really crank it out. And then I gave it to my editor, and I was really worried because it was a dramatic change. And she was so happy. She was so happy. It was really, really great just to see her response and relief all around. And so that was, I have to thank you. Thank you.
I think that's so interesting. Yeah. I think that's so interesting, too. I mean, I don't know if this took you years, but you work on something for years, and you turn it into your editor, and you turn it in, and then all of a sudden there's fresh 50 pages that are hot, and you didn't have to work on them for years, and they're in the book.
I know.
Right? They're just fresh out of the oven. It's kind of amazing.
I know. I felt like I was so lucky.
Is there a tactic there you could do next time?
I know. I'm just going to go to the god on the erg and get my next, installment.
So I'm curious in general, I don't know if you are working on something new now and you write so much about love and feelings, and we started this talking about emotions, and this is a very emotional time to be living in this country. Yeah. And I'm just curious about creating today. Yeah.
Well, as I said, I haven't been creating. I think it's very, very hard to write in these kinds of times. It's really hard to do anything. I mean, I feel in so many ways. Maine is having a surge in ice like Minnesota, but we don't have we have a smaller population, obviously, but it had been very, very intense in the last week that I was there. And then I just left, and I felt really guilty leaving. And, to go around like talking about this love story, and at the same time, I feel much less embarrassed about having written a love story, because I didn't realize writing this book what a time of hate we were going to go into. I mean, a time of true cruelty and hate that is coming from the top, that it's coming at us from our own government, is really, really shocking. But I think, what I have seen in Maine and what we are seeing in Minnesota is just a huge surge of love. I mean, and that surge of love is so much bigger than their surge of hate. And it gives, I'm sure we are all feeling this. It does give us so much hope and so much faith, and like never underestimate our capacity for love and for, real caring of our communities and our neighbors. And I really, really believe that love is the only thing that's going to save us, and I actually think it will. So,
Thank you.
thank you. We got through it without crying.
What?
We got through it without crying.
I know. I have like tissues in the book if you need them. Yeah, I think that's also a question in your novel. Is love crushing and dangerous, or is it hopeful?
Yeah. For me, it's pure hope. I side with Jordan on this one, very, very much so. It really is.
Is there anything that you really hope that people take away from this book?
I feel like I really write for each individual reader to have their own experience. And it is so interesting because each individual reader really does have their own experience. Any book that you read, you're bringing your own thoughts and memories and imagination to it all. And it is an individual experience. And so I never want to shove something down someone's throat. I know that's not what you're asking, but I'm not, I'm not interested in people liking one person and not liking another person, or, I just feel like, especially again in this time, if we can connect to our own emotions, whether it's, our own first loves or our own regrets or our own desire to communicate better, just I want it to be an emotional experience, a journey like that. That's it.
I love that. We started with emotion. We'll end with emotion. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Mitzi, so much. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
We're gonna open it up to questions. And if you have a question, if you could please come up to the microphone so everyone can hear what you want to know. There's either side. Don't be shy. All right.
First, I really enjoyed both Writers and Lovers and Heart the Lover. But my question is a little bit more about craft. You said that you keep the critic at bay during your first draft. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that? And
yes,
how you don't drown in this is terrible.
Yeah. The trick, I think, is to know when it's happening. It's like anything that any kind of behavior that you want to try to curb in yourself, is you have to know when you're doing it. And so I think it's very, very natural for all of us to write something and be disappointed, or write something and think that's not quite right. And you have to kind of think, oh, okay, I hear that. I'm going to move on. You can't respond to it all the time. And you really have to just accept and try to silence that voice. And I literally do think, I try to visualize that critic. You can give it a name if you know, especially if you think like, where it might come from. Is it male or female or non-binary? And, if you can get any sort of identification about it, and then to really just ask it to leave the room while you're writing. Just leave you alone. And then anytime you feel it creeping in, you just gently push it away. I mean, you do have to be sort of open, understanding when it's happening, and gently, possibly try. If you can't say, this is good, you can just say, I'll fix it later. I'll fix it later. I just think it's so important to get something down on the page. And I do have a few friends of mine from my youth who wanted to be writers, but their critic was so overdeveloped and their perfectionism was so extreme that there was nothing on the page for them to work with, and to actually have, nothing got written. I had one friend who used to burn everything, and it was very dramatic. And I just think what you think is really bad today really might be kind of good next week. And I'm the worst judge of my own work on the day that I write it. And I have learned that. So I do not judge it. And I just try to get something. I don't have a word count or an amount that I have to write every day. I just try to write something when I'm working on a book. And I just try to move it along. I guess that's the best I can expand on that. Thank you. Wherever you disappeared to. Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Kat, and I read Writers and Lovers a couple of years ago, and I just finished Heart the Lovers today. And so that's kind of crazy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was
Thank
crying
you.
this afternoon, and then I had to Google a term. I chat GPT'd a term. And it was, is there a term for when you read an experience and it's not until you read the experience that you realize that you've had the experience? And it came up with like a pre-conscious experience. Like when you read something and you're like, oh, I experienced that. And I'm wondering, that happened so many times when I was reading Writers and Lovers and Heart the Lovers. Do you know when you're writing those sentences?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It is surprising. I mean, it is definitely, writing is a churning up of the unconscious. I mean, things come up, and sometimes I don't know where things come from, and then a few months later, I might realize, oh, that was that, and that was. I mean, it's a little bit like Dorothy, waking up and being like, and you were the Tin Man, and you were the, There's definitely, I have that experience of not even realizing I'd experienced something until I get it down on the page, and I love that. I mean, it's like a cleanse, like I get a lot out when I do that. You really do feel like you're like just scrubbing, sorry about these bad metaphors, and getting it up and out. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Do you think, please come up and ask another question. And while you're coming up, do you think that's why we read? Because we want to read something that we know we feel, but we don't know it yet, and that writers can express that for us.
Yeah, it is. It is so wonderful when that happens. Yeah, I mean, I think we read for so many reasons, but I think reading, more than many other art forms, you can really just get into a psyche, and you can really know another person, in a novel, and that feels so good, because there are very few people that we really know in this life, and so it's so fun that we have all these books, to help us know more people.
Thankfully.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
I loved your book, Heart the Lover.
Thank you so much.
And you might have touched on this a little, but I'm always curious to know when you're writing a book, if there's ever one book that you, or more than one book, where you have the ending in your head before you start. Like you know where you want, like where it's going to go.
Yeah, yes and no. I'm not like John Irving. You know, John Irving writes the last sentence first, apparently. So no, I don't have that. But I think what I have, again, is I have a sense of where I want the character to be. And whether that's just kind of how she feels or where she is, or I have some glimmer. This ending really took me a long time. I mean, I finally figured out where she needed to be physically, but that took some doing. But I did know that I wanted her to feel that way, and I just had to kind of work my way through it. And then, like with Euphoria, I wrote a draft, and it ended where the second to last chapter ends in the book now. And I thought that was the end. I mean, that was the end. That's the end that I gave to my agent and my editor and everybody. And then I was driving on the highway to meet a friend for lunch. And I just saw this scene like years later in a museum. And I literally grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil. I was turning off of an exit to go into Portland to meet my friend for lunch, and I was just frantically scribbling like any little detail that I could. I mean, I was watching the road, but I was writing, and hoping that I was going to be able to read it later. And then that night, I wrote the last chapter, and then I quickly sent it off to everybody, and that was really. That ending is so important to me, and I can't believe it took so long to come to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Lily. Oh, come, please.
I just loved Father of the Rain.
Oh, thank you.
And I just thought maybe you could just touch on the emotion and the inspiration that sort of led you to writing that book.
Yes. It's really nice. I feel like most people ask about Euphoria and On, and I don't get to talk about my earlier books. And so that was my third novel. And that was a really hard one to write because I did have an alcoholic father who was kind of equally charismatic. And that first section of Father of the Rain really is quite autobiographical. I mean, all the scenes are invented. I have no memory for dialogue or scene, for that matter. Like all those scenes are made up, but that man and that 11-year-old girl, feel very much like me and my father. And it was really hard to write. And I had little kids, and I would write. It would come out of me very fast, and then it would just stop. And I would just kind of, I would be like, okay, it's stopping for a reason, because I just couldn't go that low with little kids. I still had to be a good mother, and I didn't want my mood to go any, too low with that. And it was hard to write those things. My dad was still alive, and then the second and the third parts, are more fictional. I drew more from my older sisters' impulses in the second part, and so I feel like that was maybe it became easier to write, and I didn't have to take these long breaks. But it was funny because when I was taking these long breaks, I was researching Euphoria. I was researching Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson, and that was how I would sort of entertain myself and lift myself out of the doldrums. And then I would go back in and write for a month and then stop again. But that was definitely a book that I had to write. And I feel like before I wrote that book, I would really bore you with stories about my dad and about his mistreatment of us all. And after I wrote that book, you'll never hear me talk about my dad. Like it was like, massive therapy to just write that book and let it go. So I highly recommend it to anybody. And who's to say what will happen with it? Not necessarily for publication, but just to get it up and out. It's a good cathartic thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lily, for coming here.
Oh,
thank you so much. Please, if you could just stay seated while Lily gets out. Explore Books is in the lobby, and they'll be selling books, and Lily will be signing them. And if she could just make her way out to the lobby, and then everyone can follow her and buy her books. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Aspen Words.